Humane doesn't have a legal definition. So if you put humane on a package, basically all a company has to do is describe like their own parameters for what they think makes it humane.
When we raise animals that we are eating or our pets are eating and they are raised in these types of conditions, I always think about what's the stress, what's it's doing to the body, the chemicals that are being made, and how is that contributing to the overall health that we're here to optimize health and support our pets and support hopefully our health too.
Between 95 and 99% of meat in this country is from factory farmed animals.
So for everyone here, welcome. I'm Dr. Katie Woodley, the natural pet doctor. And today we're going to be talking about sourcing and factors that affect the lives of farmed animals and health and nutritional factors and welfare, certifications, resources, all sorts of things. We're going to keep it at a higher level and then go a little bit deeper where we need to. But I am joined by Hanna Mendelbaum, who is the co-founder of Evermore.pet.food, and it's a pioneering brand in the fresh food space, and it's known for its ethical and transparent ingredient sourcing. So if you have not looked up Evermore, there is a link in the Facebook page that you need to check out this company. They're have been doing amazing things. And so with 2 decades of experience in the pet industry, first as a pet care business owner and certified pet dog trainer, and for the last 13 years with Evermore, she has gained a wealth of knowledge about how the choices we make for our pets impact their health and well-being. She's extremely passionate about educating folks on all things dog and has a knack for breaking down confusing concepts, especially as they pertain to food marketing. I love all of that. So Hanna, thank you so much for joining me today and taking time out of your busy day.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for having me. So yeah, animal welfare, huge topic, right?
Yes, only like small, right?
Yeah, I'm sure we have some vegetarians and vegans amongst us,
Yes.
and fully plant-based people, and that's something really a lot of people love their dogs and love their cats because they love animals, right?
Yep.
And it's really hard to get to the point where you have to accept the fact that you need to feed animals to your animal for them to live their best, healthiest life, right? We get asked all the time if we're going to make vegan or vegetarian pet food. And we have to say, unfortunately, no, because from our perspective, that's actually, cruel to the cats and dogs that we're feeding, because that's not honoring like who they are as animals, and it's sort of imposing our moral framework on them, right? So that's really difficult, but then it's hard for us to be making a product that's mostly meat. My business partner, Allison, she's actually the one who physically does the sourcing for the company. I call her the heart, and I tell everyone about it, so I'm the mouth. And I think
I love it.
we share the brains, right? So I think one of the things I'm going to share with everyone is like a pretty big, and when I learned it, staggering statistic. Depending on who you ask and which source you go to, between 95 and 99% of meat in this country is from factory farmed animals, right? That's like a huge number. Of those, 15% would come from what we call like medium welfare farms, but and less than 1%, right? Less than 1% is not what would be considered factory farms.
Wow. And just for people here, because they may not understand, like, I think there's a huge disconnect with like the food and what we eat, right? Previously on social media, I shared like some prey model stuff, and I got it in the neck, literally for it. And it's like, well, if I grind this up, it's essentially what I would be feeding my other cat who gets, the processed raw. And so I think for people who don't know what that term means, can you like just define factory farming?
Is the perfect segue, because
okay, perfect.
I was actually going to talk about this. There is I was talking to some animal welfare organizations this morning because we use our chicken is like generally considered in the grand scheme of things like higher welfare chicken. It's free range, it gets to go outside, it has like natural lighting, but it's still, raised in a fairly large operation. So from my perspective, that would still be considered a factory farm. It would be one of these like medium welfare factory farms. Although as far as stuff available in the pet industry, it is really the best you are going to get. So when I was talking to this organization, who are a very, very well-respected animal welfare organization, very, big, and what they were saying, and I can see their perspective on this, is we conflate the idea of what's known as a concentrated animal feeding operation with a factory farm. So generally people use these terms interchangeably. What a concentrated feeding animal operation is, it's like basically it's indoor raising, but it can be outdoors as well. This is interesting to me. So it has to do, the exact definition of like an animal feeding operation is, it has to do with the vegetation. Basically, if any part of an outdoor space doesn't have like vegetation going through its natural growing cycle, that's part of an animal feeding operation. And the other part is that animals are confined indoors for more than 45 days out of the year, right? That is a super technical USDA definition. A concentrated animal feeding operation has to do with like different numbers of animals, like so there's small, medium, and large, and it varies for animals. With like chickens, a large one is like 125,000 chickens, right? That's so many chickens.
Yeah, all inside, right? Like
yeah, all inside. And they can have outdoor access. That would be like a free range concentrated animal operation, but that's actually an environmental term that has to do with like how much waste is being produced and whether or not it comes into contact with water, so that's like the very technical USDA definition. It's like these operations. Now, factory farming, in terms of our understanding with it, has to do with like certain husbandry practices, So there are these factory farms, but then in this range of welfare, like when I was speaking with this organization, they were saying when they think of factory farms, they think about what it means from like the animal-centric nature of it. So in a factory farm, we're looking for like cages and overcrowding, like physically altering the animal, like debeaking, like rough handling, these like very crowded conditions, like no enrichment for the animals, not having natural light cycles. So this is sort of, what these very I'm sure we've all been on animal welfare websites where we've seen like these heartbreaking pictures.
Yeah.
That's sort of like the animal welfare understanding of what a factory farm is. And the fact that the pretty much the preponderance of meat you're going to get in this country in your pet food and your food is raised like that is heartbreaking.
That's the thing, and that's why I was, not, I guess excited's not the best word, but like, this is why this is so important, because people don't realize this.
They don't.
And, especially for our pets, and we're trying to feed the best foods, but also for ourselves. And like, I think about too, when we look at the types, when we raise animals that we are eating or our pets are eating, and they are raised in these types of conditions, I always think about what's the stress, what's it's doing to the body, the chemicals that are being made, and how is that contributing to the overall health that we're here to optimize health and support our pets and support hopefully our health too. And so hearing these like statistics and just like really knowing what these animals go through is very, very important. So that way you can source your meat or pick companies like exactly like what Evermore is doing, where you are very aware of where where the animals are coming from that you're sourcing from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, just like the health side of this and how it ties in so much with the welfare side of things. And the way I see it, and just our general philosophy around food, is there really is no difference between what you're sourcing for yourself and your animals. I'm sourcing as someone, or our company is sourcing, as a company. But individuals, when you think of getting the food in your life, think about it as sourcing, like whether it's making a decision about what pet food you buy, or if you're home preparing, like what ingredients you're buying, it's just about really thinking about where those things come from. Now, from like a specific health standpoint, when we're looking at these factory farms, I think the first things to look at are the very specific interventions that can kind of affect health. So antibiotics is a big one, right? So a big piece of, and a lot of people are very aware of the antibiotic, usage, and more people are moving towards antibiotic-free meat. And intrinsically, if meat is antibiotic-free, it's like slightly higher welfare, but it can still be raised under pretty terrible conditions and still be antibiotic-free. So another interesting, I don't want to get too into the statistics, but this is kind of a crazy one. I learned that like 70% of antibiotics used worldwide are used in animal farming, which is just insane. You probably know this one.
Well, I didn't know it was 70, like, would you say 70?
Yeah, up to 70%. Like you'll find different statistics, different places. That's how statistics are.
Like that's a big number.
That is a big number.
It's also one of the reasons why too, as veterinarians, like we're accused of antibiotic resistance, but we have to look at like exactly what you just said. It's coming from a lot of the farming and the farming practices that we have in the way that these animals are raised. And these animals are contributing to antibiotic resistance because we're not using antibiotics appropriately.
Oh yeah, I think more than anything else, I think farming operations are the biggest factor because it runs into the soil. It just, it gets everywhere. And the thing about antibiotic usage is that there's two reasons that it's used. One is because actually some antibiotics do make animals grow faster, which I don't even know how that works scientifically. It's crazy. And maybe I'd be taller if I took more antibiotics as a kid. I don't know.
Like, wait a second.
Like I'm pretty petite. And the other reason is like, this is really unfortunate because these conditions are so overcrowded, they're given prophylactically to keep animals from getting sick, right? So that's another reason we use them. In terms of antibiotic free, I think there is a greater awareness and more demand for that specifically. One thing, and this is kind of jumping around a bit, there's just so much to cover here. But one thing that's interesting is like with these never ever claims, right? One of the things that you'll see for antibiotic claims is never ever, meaning nowhere in the raising of an animal was any antibiotic used.
Now, will you see that on the label when
you will see that on a label, and antibiotic free should also indicate that as well.
Okay.
So theoretically, we shouldn't be getting any antibiotics in our food because the USDA, or it's the FDA actually, like they do have like a mandatory like detox period, but like so much testing is finding that there are antibiotics. So that's definitely, it's a little bit BS. But so if you're dealing with an antibiotic free operation, like you see this a lot in cattle, and say an animal gets sick and does need to go on antibiotics, what'll happen then is they just sell that animal off to commodity market. So then they're no longer part of this higher welfare operation, which that makes me a little sad. But,
so then they go into like,
then they get sold off to another operation. So that's, anyway, that was like totally an aside. It's just, we were talking about that. So,
I mean, I think that's important. I mean, this is where like every life truly does matter in terms of how we're treating them. I think that's really important. And, it's something to think about. Like if we don't change the systems or advocate for a change, like these animals, unfortunately, they might start off in a better situation, but just because
end up in a bad one.
Yeah, because you get sick, like
and for like a market, and that's like a marketing, just to meet this marketing claim, like to be able to put like never ever on their label, they have this one cow get sick, and then they have to just send them off to like a more horrible condition. Which at the end of the day, like no matter what, even the highest welfare meat, it's still a business. This is still like the reality of like raising animals for food. And I'll be very honest, like I do eat meat. Most of it comes from the farm around the corner, where I like get to see the animals and walk there. But anyway, back to other interventions that we use, in factory farming. So hormones are another big one. And hormones, you'll see hormone-free claims on a lot of things. And this is actually ties into a marketing claim that drives me crazy. So in the US, you're not allowed to use hormones in raising pigs or in raising chickens. Like that's illegal. And what you'll see on all of these packages is like hormone-free chicken. And it's like, but then it's like they have to put a disclaimer at the bottom, like federal law prohibits the use of. So, but that's like a hook. Like people are seeing this thing that
Yeah.
That's just chicken in the US. Like, you don't have to say hormone free. It's not a selling point.
And
And
it
then
feels good when you see it.
yeah, it feels good when you see
Yeah.
it. You think you're doing something extra. That's good. Another one that I've been seeing a lot actually in pet food. I don't know that I've ever seen this in human food, but I'm seeing this a lot in pet food, and it's driving me nuts, is the cage-free chicken, made with cage-free chicken.
Yep.
So all broiler chicken in the US, none of it's raised in cages. Like, there is no such thing as caged chicken. So that's sort of like making a welfare claim, a company communicating something that it makes it seem like they care about welfare, and they know that consumers want welfare. Like, every time, like over and over again, when there's sort of like these like market research surveys about animal welfare, time and time again, like the vast majority of consumers do want higher welfare products, and they're willing to pay more money for it.
So
So
if you put it on your label, you can charge more as a
yeah,
market.
and even if like you're making someone like think that it's higher welfare, even when it's not. So there's a lot of room for vague language around welfare. One also, this isn't humane, right? The word humane appears on a lot of things. I mean, my company uses the word humane, but there's no, and because unfortunately, there's a limited lexicon that we have to describe some of this stuff, but humane doesn't have a legal definition. So if you put humane on a package, basically all a company has to do is describe like their own parameters for what they think makes it humane. So it could be anything like humane. They could literally say like gentle handling, vegetarian feed. There could be any sort of parameters basically saying we're humane because we meet our standards of what we think is humane. So that's just another one. Yeah, it's another one for people to look out for, and we see that a lot. In terms of trying to think of other things that you'll see on labels, one thing that you'll see a lot of is like certifications.
Yep.
And if people have questions, feel free to jump in because
definitely. I'm watching for that because I know this is a lot.
It's a lot.
And it's something that is really, really important because I mean, we talk about marketing from like ingredient list perspective, that's a huge thing. Like, thinking that you're feeding mainly a meat product when you're feeding kibble because of the list of ingredients. And this just takes it way past that. Like, this is where this is so important and so many people don't know about this. So if you need clarification on something, or you're seeing something, like if you're grabbing your bag of food and you're seeing a marketing term and you're not sure what it means, drop it in the comment area or in the Q&A. So that way, we can talk about it and what that actually truly means, because it could have a huge implication whether or not you're supporting that company.
Yeah, and so many of these terms really do mean nothing. And this is such a huge topic, so I'm probably going to dive around to different parts of it in more detail than people want. But certifications are a big thing. You'll probably see these little badges at the bottom of different things you're buying, whether it's for yourself or your pets. There aren't too many pet foods that have, two big ones are like certified humane and GAP certified are the ones that you'll see the most of. And not too many pet food companies have these, right? What certifications are is that they're kind of a shorthand, right? You can know that this company has met these sort of standards to qualify to have this badge on their packaging, right? The badge on the packaging is also marketing. So it's sort of a program that a company chooses to become a part of. But by becoming a part of this program, you're committing to that level of standards and to buying from suppliers that meet that level of standards. So that does create sort of like a level of third-party verification. And a lot of consumers look for these. There's all kinds of little badges and certification programs out there, right? Like you see non-GMO, you see Detox Project, you see all of these consumer certifications. Now, greenwashing is a real problem, and some certifications carry more weight than others, right? There are some where you just see the little badge and you're like, oh, this like American Humane Society of Wizards, there's just so many different little organizations that certify things. A really good resource to know which certifications are kind of more meaningful than others is the Animal Welfare Institute. And it's awionline.org. I wrote a couple things
I
down
love
to
that.
remember
Okay,
to
I
share
will
these.
share that.
Yeah, and a big part of what they do is help cut through that noise of, I think they even have like a claims part too, where they help people decipher what different claims mean. So that's a really helpful resource for people. And a lot of these different certifications are spearheaded by animal welfare organizations. Standards are come up in concert with welfare organizations. One thing that I found like really, really interesting is that a lot of the people that work in animal welfare, specifically in organizations to improve the lives of farm animals, right? We're not talking about doing away with farm animals altogether. They're not like trying to abolish meat. What they're trying to do is raise the standards. A lot of people doing that work are vegan themselves. It's like they understand that reality, that they're not going to stop people from eating meat altogether. So it's like, how can we improve the lives of as many animals as possible? Like, how can we move that dial? And I think that that's, it's really a big part of everything to be a part of with their consumer choice. It's how can we be a part of moving that dial, which is why I would hope people make the choice to support companies. And this isn't even me trying to sell my food. This is, if you are going to move the conversation, you have to do it kind of from the bottom up. Yes. And it's interesting too, because even at the top, they're starting to care about what's happening at the bottom. So let's take a company like Applegate, right? They're one of the biggest, and this is human food. They're like kind of one of the biggest mainstream kind of better meat companies for getting like your sliced deli meats. And they use higher welfare meat. Actually, we use one of the same suppliers that they do. I mean, they're massive. They use a lot of suppliers, but one of their suppliers is one of our suppliers. Anyway, they're now owned by Hormel. Like they're a company that's doing it right, but these bigger companies are seeing what's happening, and it's partially marketing, but this is where the market is moving. So there's a real interest in companies that are doing better. And it's like, if we can sort of influence these bigger companies by creating the demand, and part of me like hates it. Part of me hates that these mega corporations are acquiring, smaller companies that are doing it right. But the flip side of it is it means that more people want this.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because we look at these big corporations. I'm not going to say their names. We know, like, big candy companies, like that are,
acquiring certain Canadian pet care brands. Which
yeah,
like today.
Yeah, and so the thing is people hate, like you just nailed it on the head, where it's like, oh my God, now I can't use any of that food. But hopefully what's happening here is they're realizing that people want better. And so what's nice about, if they're, with bigger corporations, is that they have more money usually to make that change hopefully happen faster. But we are part of that change and asking for a change. And the way that we do that is we educate ourselves, and then we also become a part of that movement and ask for better. So I think that's like exactly what you said. Just because a big corporation buys, yes, it makes you think like, okay, how are they acting, right?
Yeah. And how are they going to ruin this product?
Yeah, that's what I think. Like, that's like, oh God, now I can't recommend this product. But maybe they're gonna, watch it, monitor it, know who is like the umbrella company of what you're using, if there is one, and then ask the questions and make sure that we're asking for better. I think it's a huge thing that we can do, and we can be advocates for.
And speaking of mega corporations doing things, that's actually, so one of the initiatives that we've signed on to, but it's actually mostly larger companies that have signed on to, is something called the Better Chicken Commitment. And this is basically, and I think this is raising the floor. Like, I don't think that this is fully where we should be going, but it's basically an initiative that was kind of co-authored by like 10 global animal welfare organizations, like the really big ones. And basically it was like, okay, what are these baseline standards? What should they be for broiler chickens? Because I didn't get into this at the beginning, but really when we're talking about animal husbandry, chickens and pigs have it the worst. Like, it's so most people who care about like animal welfare who eat some meat, they like don't eat cows. They're like, I don't eat beef because cows are really cute. Like, let's
Yeah,
face
they
it.
are. I love
But
cows.
yeah,
I mean, but yeah, I mean,
but when it comes down to the actual welfare of how the animals are raised, chickens and pigs, like hands down, like suffer the absolute most.
yeah.
And what the better chicken commitment is sort of this baseline set of standards that was, it addresses 5 components of welfare. One of them is just the chicken genetics. So
Mm,
a lot of why chickens suffer as much as they do is the birds that they've been bred to be. Like, they've been bred to have these like massive breasts and like their legs break, their
and like
hearts give out.
walk. I
They
know.
cannot walk. Like, it's just really, really, really sad. So part of that initiative is suppliers have to commit to moving away from those breeds to higher welfare breeds that are slower growing. And that alone will just be so huge in terms of how it affects the lives of chickens.
Yeah.
The next one is just setting like better minimum space requirements in terms of like reducing crowding.
Yeah.
So that's a big part. Then there's like enrichments. So most higher welfare meat provides environmental enrichments for birds to express their natural behaviors. So things like perches and like things they can push around and just things in their environment that they can engage with, because every animal wants to play and live and engage in the behaviors that it's supposed to. And then there's the slaughter component. I think that's the part that gets people the most about me, is just thinking about that piece of things. And there are more humane ways to do it. And the better chicken commitment involves moving over to what's known as controlled atmosphere stunning, where basically they get CO2 pumped into the room, and they just fall asleep before they're processed. So I mean, that would be a huge improvement. And the fifth and final and probably most important part of this is third-party oversight. So if even if you're like a carnivore in your day-to-day life and you routinely eat chicken, you can find out which companies have signed on to like the better chicken commitment. And these are like huge companies like McDonald's and KFC.
Oh,
and
wow.
there's 2 versions and one's more stringent. And like I said, this is just raising the floor. I think everything has to be, I think 2026 is the deadline for these changes to be in place.
Okay.
But
And where would you go to see like what companies do you have to go to? Like,
it's better. It's their website. I think
Okay.
it's better. What's the Better Chicken Commitment website? I should know this. I should have written
That's
this
okay.
down.
That's okay. No, I'll look it up and put it
But you
in.
can look it up. It's
comments.
like
Yep.
200 companies, and I think like some really huge poultry producer in the US, like one of the biggest ones. So it's good to know that the companies are at least taking these steps forward, and like I said, raising the floor.
Nestle is part of it.
Yeah, like I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking like huge corporations.
Yeah,
So
no, it's great.
yeah, so
And you're right.
that's just
Easy
something people
website.
should look for. And that's chickens.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I mean, there's a lot of documentaries out there too to help like educate yourself around this. And I like that you're giving some websites for people to dive a little bit deeper, especially like the certifications and like this better chicken commitment. Because a lot of people don't realize, I mean, I can't remember, you probably know how long, like the chicken, like lifespan where
47 days.
yeah, like it's insane.
47 days.
Yeah.
So, and bringing up those documentaries, there's so many out there, and those documentaries, they have one goal in mind, and that's to take people to a completely plant-based place. And they're gutting and they're riveting. And I think that they create this very black and white scenario that in some ways does themselves a disservice. Because there are people that are never going to give up meat. And instead of being presented like this sort of nuanced view of like, okay, there's factory farming, and then this is what a high welfare farm looks like, and you can do things to improve your meat consumption, it creates this very like us versus them mentality. And I'm really happy that, some people will watch these and be like, I'm going to change everything. I think being plant-based is great. And I've gone through phases of my life where I've been like fully plant-based. I've gone through, I've definitely have run the gamut of different ways of being in terms of that stuff. And I think that it's important to understand that any changes that you can make in your meat consumption, reduction in meat consumption, conscientiousness about what you're doing, that moves a dial. And that's really important. So
Well,
it's not an all or nothing.
yeah, and
Um,
I think that's really important too, because I'm a meat eater, but I'm also very aware of like who are we sourcing? Where are these animals? We lived in New Zealand and we raised sheep and we had lambs and I ate our lambs like that. And I knew what their lifestyle was like, and they had a great life and I knew the whole life cycle. But also too, this is where being able to source locally and support farmers that are doing it right, and regenerative farming is a big thing. I know that's not welfare, but that's all about
oh,
like
it's
supporting the
totally welfare.
okay. All
It's
right, good.
totally
All
welfare.
right, so like supporting the
Yes, no,
ecosystem and
okay. There's so
soil.
many topics, and please dive in as much as you can because I'll just go off on some weird tangent or trail off. So first of all, I'm glad you mentioned New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand, it is like the law there that everything has to be fully grass fed. I mean, that is the default in New Zealand, at least from our understanding. Correct me
Yeah,
if I'm wrong.
they do have some, I think, well, the last time, because I went to vet school there, so it's been a while since I've actually lived there, but I believe they had two like more intensive farming, like I think it was cattle farms in the South Island, but for the majority, I don't know how that's changed. Don't hold me to that, but I believe that was something that
For
was
cattle,
happening.
because for
Yeah.
lamb, like I know from our lamb suppliers, they're very much like, no, this is
Yes,
just the
the
way that
lamb. Yeah,
it
the
is.
lamb
Yeah.
they have more lambs
And
than people there.
that's
Like,
why we get our lamb from New Zealand. It's the only thing we don't source domestically, because actually grass-fed lamb in New Zealand is like easier to get than here. And
oh,
part of that just has to do with growing seasons and like where
yeah,
you can actually raise animals in the US. But it's
yeah.
funny. I can't believe so you raised your own lamb.
Yeah. So we lived on a little lifestyle block. And so we had, I mean, we were surrounded by like farms, and I mean, it's either me mowing the grass, like acres,
Or having the lambs
or
do
we
it.
have like sheep, and then we had a ram, and it was just like, here you go. Like, obviously I didn't have any rhyme or reason or really know what I was doing, to be honest, but it was one of those things where it was like, it was a good lesson. And it also, like, to me, it felt good knowing that they had a good life. I obviously did not process them. I could not do
That's
that.
where you draw. That's where you draw the
Yeah, I
line.
was like, okay, you come and you take them, and then we go and pick them up, like, and be able to eat them. But it was, honestly, they were like, this sounds awful, and there's probably vegetarians and vegans here, but they were like the best tasting lamb. And it felt like I knew they were grass fed. They didn't get any antibiotics. They were like never sick. They just like, it was just an amazing life for them, and it felt good. And I knew like they were also feeding my health, and so yeah, it was just like a way to be a part of that cycle, because I find so many times that we just become so disconnected, and it's like, oh well, why don't you just go to this, like, I can't eat your lamb, oh my gosh. And I'm like, well, you're going to the grocery store and you're buying meat,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
you
it'd
know
be
where that meat
better
came from,
to
like,
eat.
yeah, it's
I mean,
crazy.
that's why I go to the farmer on the corner from my house, like Farmer
Yeah,
Ruth. I love her. She just is like, yeah, happy animals taste better.
yeah. I
That's her whole
love that.
thing.
It's so
Yeah,
true. It's the
it is really.
stress too, like we were talking about at the beginning. And I mean, these intensive farming situations and welfare concerns, I mean, they're such higher levels of stress for these poor animals. And, this is why also too, there's this need for a lot more antibiotic usage, because they're more sick. I
They're
mean,
more
think of like,
sick. They're eating things. This is actually so species appropriate diets, right? We like talk
yes,
about that for cats and dogs and how important it is to eat a species appropriate diet, but for their health and just their lives. But we don't really think about that for the farm animals, right? So we do know that grass fed is better, and that's because the lambs and the cattle eating grass fed, right? They're eating a species appropriate diet for them. They're not getting like the bacterial overgrowth in the stomachs from eating grains that they're not supposed to be eating, and they're converting grass, like they should be, into energy for their bodies, and they're healthier because of that. Like their omega ratios,
yes,
and it is unbelievable. So when we started out, like we couldn't afford fully grass fed. We were using Diamond Ranch beef. It was great meat, very humanely raised. But at the time, they didn't have a full grass fed program. Now they do, but so we're using grain finished, and then when we switched over to grass fed, and we finally got to the point of the company where we could do that, we do lab testing, and our omega ratios like completely, and they were good because we use fish oil and balance it, but like where it just like hit naturally, just like completely shifted.
yeah.
Like we really saw that. So you see that in any time an animal is pastured and allowed to be in its environment, whether it's like sheep, cattle, eggs, or chicken, the like omega ratios are so much better. I mean, there's other nutritional differences as well. But like that's really the big one. So we see that when they can have their species appropriate diet, which for chickens, as you know, like you see all these like vegetarian fed, like it's like this good thing for them. Chickens are omnivores. They're little freaking dinosaurs. So here's like my really fun chicken fact that I learned like way more recently than I wish. So chickens are like the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. And right? I just learned this. And they share a common ancestor with Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I didn't know that.
I mean, you see them walking and you're like, every time I look at a chicken,
makes sense.
Right? Because they look like dinosaurs. Every time I see a chicken, I'm like, yes, I understand how like dinosaurs became birds. But
oh my goodness,
they really are the closest.
So I mean, now we're feeding them grain. So
now we're and you know, they naturally will forage on just pretty much anything. Like they can eat grain, they can eat all that stuff, but they also eat like mice, bugs, each other's eggs. So they should have the opportunity to do that. And in pastured operations, like you'll still see vegetarian fed, which means that the feed that we're giving them is vegetarian, but then they still have the option to get, to get what they can catch.
And is it, I mean, there's a distinction too, though, and I don't know if you want to go into it, but with like your free range and like access to the outdoors, isn't there a distinction where some, like if they have a door open, but you have like, you know, 100,000 chickens, like they don't know, the ones down here have no idea there's like a little tiny door leading to the outside.
So and there's obviously very like, so for example, we use what's commonly known to be like a pretty awesome free range supplier. So they're not fully pastured outdoor chickens. In fact, in the pet space and even in the grocery space, you will almost never find pastured chickens that have like full pasture access. And even some quote like pastured operations are like chickens in boxes, like where they'll like move these enclosures around fields, but they're still highly enclosed. It's like, it's really interesting, like kind of the development of that. And part of it is just like the creature that a chicken is, right? Like everyone eats chicken. They literally need to raise a lot of these things. And that's, I mean, there's just some like really harsh realities about chicken farming specifically, that really breaks my heart. Your best, for the most humane chicken out there, the best bet is to like go to your local farmers market and like talk to people. We as a company have been trying forever to move to pastured chicken, right? It is almost impossible to secure at the volume that we need, and we're a small company, right? Like, or it's like just astronomically expensive per pound. I did this exercise yesterday where I went to the grocery store, and I looked at different pricing for chicken, because if I do buy chicken out, like I always get this, I don't want to talk about how much I spent on it, but you know, it's just looking at the prices, and fully conventional like store brand chicken was, I wrote it down, so I'm just putting it down, was like $3.49 a pound, right? So that's just like fully conventional store brand, like no claims attached to it. An ABF, like antibiotic free, non-GMO fed chicken was $5.99 a pound. From one of these like mass market, like organic chicken free range brands, probably free range, like you said, like you see the door, but like maybe one chicken like not going out. That was $9.99 a pound.
Oh my God.
And like and that's just, and this is just like low end free range. Like I couldn't even, and I went to the health food store to find like the good health food store, and like it lived by Woodstock, New York, like it's hippie town. I couldn't even find pastured chicken in the good health food store. It's really hard to find. Like you'll go to Whole Foods, so you can't find it. Just in terms of pastured rates, there are very few operations that do this. So in pet food, unless you're doing like home prepared, you're not going to find it.
So I mean, so just to like give people some tools also when they're looking at food, or they're looking at like labels, like what would you say are the big things people should be looking for that's really like supporting as most optimal welfare as possible, and supporting those companies that, are doing things right? What would you say are some like the big keys that you'd look for?
Specifics. Okay, so what you want is specifics. And like I said, even though I said welfare certifications aren't a be all end all, I would look for something like GAP certified or certified humane, like in terms of like these are like the welfare certifications that pet food companies are getting. Not very many of them, but they're out there. You are going to want to look at specifics claims language, like antibiotic free. That's specific, right? You're going to want to look at grass fed is like gold standard, the best, like 100% grass fed. These are specific things where there's definitions attached to them. It's almost more like what you should avoid rather. Oh, and if someone identifies their sourcing too, like if somebody's like, we partner with this, company, like that's a good thing. What you don't, it's like if you see things like family farmed, ranch raised, like, that's almost, or my favorite, cage free chicken. I mean, it's more about if there's sort of like a deliberate vagueness to it, like you're going to want to avoid it. And I can understand why pet food manufacturers oftentimes don't want to tie themselves to specific claims. And that's because a lot of times it's sort of like catch as catch can, right? Like there's like these ingredients brokers that'll come to you and be like, hey, we've got this like 2-year-old beef, it's on the back of the truck kind of things. Like there's all these like deals of like, oh, this didn't sell. Do you want to buy this? So a lot of times people might be hesitant to commit to certain things.
Well, that's like a huge thing with the sourcing, right? Because when you think about like how pet food's made, most people don't even know, and most veterinarians don't even know what rendering is. Like honestly, if everyone wants to lose their dinner tonight, just look up rendering. But that's like because you're getting just all sorts of things, and then it's being rendered down into your meal, and then it's being sold to different companies, correct?
Correct. And I mean, my brain is like stuck on the fresh side of things. But
so I go to like that.
It's okay. It's like when I'm talking about that even, and there are certified humane like kibbles and things like that out there. But I'm just so stuck on fresh whenever I'm talking about anything, even though I know the vast majority of what's out there is not fresh.
It's just another reason though to see if you can, and it's never to say like, I know not everyone could feed fresh, but if you can start incorporating fresh, this is just one of the many reasons. And it doesn't have to be every meal, like even using it as a topper can make a huge difference to your pets.
Agreed.
There's so many studies now.
And even humane all the time. Like if you can't, this is so much more to swing financially for people. And I like completely 100% understand that. So this is where you can incorporate this slowly. And if you are lucky enough to live somewhere where there's a farmer's market, those prime cuts are going to be super expensive, but every single one of these markets, like the farmers will have organ meats. They will have, bones. They will have things that aren't their expensive cuts, that they'll even be like specifically like, okay, this is for dog owners, so I really encourage people to shop as locally as they can, because then you really have the opportunity to find out what you're getting.
I love we have some local butcher shops here that source everything from the local farm, so you can go in there and you can get like the organs from these animals that were going to just potentially be thrown away. And you can use that in, making your own diets or using it. I have clients who will dehydrate things too. And, it's just really nice to be able to utilize some of these sources and also support people that are doing their best to, help these animals and give them the best lives possible that they can.
Absolutely. The number of, and this is again, things getting sucked up, but the number of independent farmers in this country is just dramatically decreasing and has been over the past couple of decades. So
we need to support them.
We need to support them as much as we can.
It's not, it doesn't look good if we don't support them. Like we have a huge issue with the way like farming and, that's another topic, but I think you mentioned too, just briefly before, this went by really, really fast, but
we could have 10 other talks. There's so much I didn't cover.
So I think what would you say, what would be some of the big things, like some of the other big areas you really want people to know about, like that based, God, this could be number like so many
This could be
talks.
like, I know we should have picked one of the like 6 bullet points I
Yes.
gave you to talk about
Maybe,
today.
well, you did mention though, I do want to touch on this because I want to give people tactical stuff that they can do. And I like the specifics and listing that out. You also mentioned like the too vague. If there are certain things that you can see on the label that would be like, oh my God, don't touch that type of thing?
Like I said, that cage-free chicken. Like I think anything where it's just ranch raised, farm raised, like things that are just truisms, hormone free when referring to things that don't have hormones, anything where it's like, this is telling me nothing more about the product than that it exists, because every animal is raised on a farm or a ranch,
Yep.
or I always find like I find the overdone pictures of things, you know what I'm talking about, like the beautiful photos. I always find that so deceptive too.
Yeah.
I think for me and for companies in general, you're not going to get good information looking at packaging. You're really not. And an ingredient list, the other thing, when you read an ingredient list, you're not legally allowed to put any sort of adjective other than organic. So unless an ingredient is organic, you can't say free range chicken on the actual ingredient list of your label. So you really do have to dig deeper. If you have questions about a company's welfare practices, if they have a minimal policy, you should be able to ask. I mean, you should really be able to ask, or you should be able to go on a website and it's clear. If a company is not making something very clear on its website, it means that they're not doing it, right? Because it's a selling point that we use pastured eggs. It's a selling point if someone uses antibiotic-free meat. Like, people want this stuff. So a company is not specifically saying that they're doing it, they're not doing it.
Yeah. And I think too, or just to interject really quick, like reaching out to that company, if they don't provide that information like really easily, I would walk away.
There's also 2 words that I find to be red flags, and they're not always red flags as long as they can be qualified, and that's when possible, right? If somebody says, we do this when possible, like, what does that mean? And it's one thing, so I'm in the Northeast, right? And you'll see on menus, like, we use local when possible, right? That makes sense. Like, we don't have like full year-round growing seasons. Like, we can't get local produce in the winter. So also, like, similarly, if a company says something like organic when possible, but they're based in California, it's always possible. What does that mean? So just getting benchmarks for when certain thing, if there's a language like that, that's vague. Specificity. If you need to be able to get specificity from a company. And I think that that's really important, or like what their policies are. It's interesting. So we were approached by a welfare organization about this like scorecard report that they were doing, and they wanted us, and we were obviously doing everything right. They even told us that they're like, we want this language on your website, just clarifying that you have a policy around this, right? And it was really simple. It had to be like, we don't support the use of like battery cages for chickens or like gestation crates for pigs, which we would never do. Like, ever. Also, we don't even make a pig product, but they really wanted us to have that on our website. But that's a policy. We have like this policy. So if a company has a framework that they're working from, that's really important to just see that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, those are great. And I think you were going to mention something else before I brought up that, in terms of, let's see, outdoor access genetics, you talked about all that.
Oh, we brought up regenerative really quickly. You brought it up before, and I do think that that's like 100% tied to welfare, right? Because there's like nothing more natural for an animal than it like living in concert with the land in the way that it's supposed to. There's nothing more natural for a cow. I mean, I guess cows aren't really natural anyway. They're bred to be cows, but you know what I mean? Them to like roam through the environment like an herbivore should, right? The whole idea of regenerative farming is it's filling those niches in the ecosystem.
I just thought of this is awful. And I don't, so you mentioned like we bred cows to be cows, but I thought of like humans, like how unnatural are humans? Like, we put up like these buildings and we like destroy stuff and like all
We're
this,
pretty
you know what I
unnatural.
mean? Like, if we have to like talk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, let's bring it back to like reality, right? Like
Which is crazy because we wouldn't even be humans. I mean, I really buy into coevolutionary theory. Like dogs got us here. So
yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like in reality, and this is why like, well, regenerative farming, and more people need to be aware of this, because I mean, if we don't go that way, we don't have life. Like that's a reality. Like we are turning soil into dirt. And so if we don't learn how to farm the land, how to use it appropriately, we can actually utilize animals to help regenerate the soil microbiome. And that's the thing. Like this is a whole nother
this is a whole other topic. I mean, I don't think we even defined regenerative farming for people, because I think like you and I are taking this for granted. But just to bring it back for people, regenerative farming is basically the set of agricultural principles that animals are supposed to interact with the land in a certain way. It began with actually elephants in Africa, and the idea that these large roaming herbivores keep the soil healthy the way it's supposed to be and maintain like basically the biome of the earth, right? Through their stomping and excrement and all that stuff. They keep everything from turning to desert. And we don't have these large roaming herbivores the way we did. Think about like the American Great Plains and how we've basically killed all the buffalo, and more land is turning to desert. So the idea of regenerative farming is that it's using cows and sheep, and there are ways to do it with poultry as well, to mimic these natural patterns of animals roaming across the land. And what this does is it creates carbon sinks, it keeps the soil healthy, and does everything it can to sort of combat these forces of like basically the planet turning to desert.
Yeah, and I mean, and the other piece to this too is like the glyphosate usage. It's just killing everything and affecting our soil. It kills the microbiome, whether it's in your gut, your pet's gut, or in the soil too. So I think it's just, I mean, it's just another factor that, plays a part of this whole ecosystem that we're talking about in terms of welfare and viewing everything, because it's all interconnected. I think that's an important piece to this conversation is like, yes, there's a lot of terms and a lot of areas to navigate, and I don't fully 100% understand all of it by any means. But it's very important to become aware so we can just show up and do better and be a better part of the ecosystem so that we can like protect our planet, support animals, support pets. Like we're all in it together. And I think that's very important. We tend to forget about our place, and we only focus on ourselves, and we forget about all these other moving pieces that are so important. So this conversation is just, it's really, really important, even though it's kind of technical at times, but I think more people need to become aware of it so we can do better and we can show up better.
Yeah, it's like it's something we think about as a company every day. It's how can we make this ecosystem a little bit better? How can we support the people that are doing it right? The parts of the animals that we're buying, these aren't, and this should be for pet food in general. Like it's not that we want the garbage, it's not that you want like fur like mixed up, but you want to use every part of the animal. And we use muscle meats, but they're not the prime cuts that are going to a restaurant. They're not, this isn't like going to be like your steak at Chez Panisse. It's the part of the animals that they're perfectly nutritious, but they should be feeding our dogs. They shouldn't just go to waste. And we as humans should acknowledge our role in eating less meat. I'm not saying people need to eat no meat, but I think it's just we should be so conscious about where things are coming from. And it's just so easy to get disconnected, to see this package at a store, to think of animals as products. And I think to bring it back to factory farming, that's really what it is. It's kind of like this end result of capitalism. It's seeing animals as products to be exploited, as opposed to sentient beings that like we should be grateful that like they're giving us their meat.
I think really, that's really important. And I think it's the whole like blessing and gratitude over our food and being aware of those animals that came from this place that is now feeding us and feeding our families and feeding our fur family. And it all just comes back to awareness and being cognizant of the process and how things are done and questioning systems, and I think it's important too, looking at where can you get more plants into your diet. Yes, our dogs and cats need this. This is how they're made. Like, this is not a talk to turn to vegan diets for our pets. That won't help their ideal health by any means. And
For so many reasons.
we are not advocating for that.
And
But
it won't help the planet either. I mean, if you think about it, like, yes, meat emissions are really bad, but these vegan diets for pets, like, these are not coming from like pastoral farmlands. Like, these are from like industrial monoculture farms, that are sprayed with glyphosate. Like, you're not going to find too many like vegan organic pet food. I mean, there's some, but really at the end of the day, it's replacing one industrialized food system with another. And
yeah,
that's not the answer.
no. And here's the other piece too. If you're using these current diet, like these vegan diets too, and there's not a ton of synthetic vitamins and minerals in there, it's not going to be balanced. We're going to see a lot of health issues result from that. So I'm grateful that we can utilize animals to feed our pets, and achieve optimal health or help them achieve as best of health as possible. But I think this is just another conversation in that topic of how do we do that, and how do we make sure that the entire ecosystem is healthy or as healthy as possible, and how can we contribute and ask for companies to do it better. I think that's very, very important. So Hanna, is there any like last, like final thing, like one thing you'd like to leave people with? Because obviously we're going to have another conversation.
Totally. I just want to give people some resources,
Yes.
just so they can, just some like websites and things like that. So I already mentioned the Animal Welfare Alliance. They're really great. There's also the Cornucopia Institute.
Okay.
That's cornucopia.org. And they look at food, like they don't just limit themselves to animal welfare. This is about food systems in general, but they're fantastic. There's also Farm Forward. That's farmforward.org. And these are three organizations that are doing like really good work in the animal space. And there's organizations that you probably know, like the ASPCA and Humane Society as well.
Yeah.
So those, I would say, are kind of like the organizations that are really, doing the good work. And if people want to really educate themselves further, those are some resources that I would point people to.
Perfect. And I'll get those from you so I can include them in the links for people to find easily, because I know a lot of people in this community do research and want to know more so they can do better, make sure they're doing as best they can. And what we'll do is we'll repost this and share this so people can watch the replay. And also too, where can they find you and the amazing things that you are doing in this world? Because you are doing such awesome stuff.
So sure, our website is evermore.pet.food.com. Awesome. And that's really, and on Instagram we're Evermore Pet Food, and on Facebook, guess what?
Evermore
Pet Food.
You made it easy for everyone.
And we're on Twitter, but we really never use it. So.
That's okay. We
have no patience for Twitter.
It's all good.
So that's where you can find us. And if you use the contact form on the website, like everyone at the company sees it, we're a very small company. So if you have questions for me or my partner Allison about sourcing or anything else, we'll totally get back to you. Trying to think of anything else.
You have some really good resources too on your website about sourcing. So please check that out at evermore.pet.food.com to get more information. And then of course we'll post some links here, and of course we'll have Hanna back to learn more and to dive deeper probably into one or two topics so it can be more solidified and go a bit deeper too into some of these areas, because it's just it's a topic that so many people just don't know or understand or even realize it's really out there, and we're just kind of assuming that these companies have the best interest of the animals at hand, and a lot of times unfortunately it's not the case, as you stated at the very beginning with some of those kind of scary statistics. So, but I appreciate everyone showing up live and taking time out of your day to learn more. I love that people here just want to do better and show up more. And so I appreciate every single person. And Hanna, I appreciate your time and your passion. Like, your mission is incredible and it inspires me personally. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here. I look forward to being back.
Awesome. Take care. All right. Bye, everyone.
Everyone.